Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and let's have a little bit of a discussion about a topic that kind of dominated the music water cooler yesterday, and that is the removal of R. Kelly and XXXTentacion from Spotify playlists. This is an article from the New York Times, although this has been reported on numerous publications, and there's actually been some developments since the release of this article, as we see that Pandora is no longer promoting R. Kelly's music as well. I guess kind of following in suit with the Spotify decision, and who knows if there are going to be other streaming platforms who are going to do the same thing as well. So, as you can already tell from the headline over here, yes, Spotify has removed R. Kelly and XXXTentacion from their major, I guess, promotional arm, and that is their playlist. Those are their playlist series, Rap Caviar and the like. So you cannot go on these playlists and hear the music of these artists suggested to you anymore. And as we can, I guess, guess from the discussion around this and from Spotify's statement here, they're doing it as a result of the behaviors and the allegations and the reputational patterns that have been kind of dogging these artists over the years, some of which are more recent than others in the case of R. Kelly. But I think the decision that they're making here, while it is causing quite a stir, and Spotify has to be careful with not being too draconian, because the more, I guess you could say, oppressive they are with what they have and don't have on their platform, the more chance there is that you're going to have a Streisand effect type situation around it, where you're going to drive more interest in that particular thing. It's going to become more taboo. More people are going to be interested in accessing it as a result of you trying to limit access to it. Allowing the music of these artists on the platform, but just not promoting it and not aligning your brand with it, but just allowing it to have a place to live because you're a company kind of making business decisions here, and your marketplace kind of demands that you have artists on there that are huge artists that people want to hear. Because look, at the end of the day, while there are a lot of people who rightly so might not want to listen to an artist who they know has allegations or convictions to their name, that, you know, they don't agree with their behaviors or actions or whatnot, people are free and within their right, and I think within their logical right, to decide, well, that's not something I want to spend my time listening to. That's not something I want to spend my time supporting. Just like I think it's within the right of another person to say, well, you know, it's not as big a deal to me. I feel like this is a decision that kind of meets both of those points of view. If somebody really wants to hear the music of R. Kelly and XXXTentacion, it's out there. You could seek it out. You could find it. It's there. Nobody's stopping you from listening to it. But now Spotify is just no longer going to be aligning their brand with that. Now, what is their reasoning for doing this? Is it purely a moral one? I mean, maybe in a sense it is. Maybe they truly do feel that way. It also could be seen as a business decision, because sure, maybe this could make them look more moral. It's going to create more, I guess, buzz for them in the media, more articles, more discussion. Maybe some people will be swayed to think that maybe Spotify is the moral streaming service here in a way. But XXXTentacion, his camp had a response to this whole decision here, which I think is actually a pretty fair point. And R. Kelly's camp had a response as well, which we will get into after this. But XXXTentacion's camp essentially contacted saying, hey, Joe, I don't have a comment, just a question. Will Spotify remove all of the artists listed below from playlists? Gene Simmons, sexual battery, Red Hot Chili Peppers, sexual assault, David Bowie, rape allegations, real estate, sexual misconduct, Backstreet Boys, Nick Carter, sexual assault, Ozzy, Ace of Base, Seal, Jimmy Page, James Brown, Michael Jackson, Miles Davis, Sid Vicious, 6ix9ine, Nelly, Miguel, Trey Songz, Dr. Dre, Fabulous. Like, the list goes on even from here. And these are some huge major artists. If Spotify removed these artists from playlists, not only would record labels not be happy, but also, like, it would piss a lot of people off. It would piss off a lot of fans. And is Spotify willing to affect their bottom line for this moral decision? Probably not, you know? And I feel like, in a way, what Spotify is doing here is making an even worse statement, because, you know, it's one thing to sort of say, okay, well, you know, we're just taking a neutral kind of stance here. We're just providing the music. It's really up to the people whether or not they listen to it or skip it or whatever. Even if we are playlisting it, you could take that stance. People may disagree with you. It may not be the most morally righteous stance, but you could make that argument. You could take that stance. But this over here shows essentially what Spotify is saying, that accusations and interest in these types of accusations basically have a statute of limitations. Oh, well, if you're a classic artist and your sexual assault conviction or allegations happened 20, 30, 40 years ago, then we don't care anymore, which in a way I think is an even worse way of putting it. Then you're essentially saying that, well, what happened in the past is in the past, and what happens now is happening now, and that's what we concern ourselves with the most. For me, if you're going to stick to the morale of this decision that you're making here, you've got to kind of stick to it for the entire timeline. You can't just be selective with it in hopes that people aren't going to look up when this stuff might have happened in the past. That's not the way the internet works. It's not the way things work. So even though, you could say, well, maybe XXXTentacion's team is just kind of doing a no you sort of thing. Still, I do think the point that they're bringing up is fair. I do think it calls into question whether or not Spotify is truly being consistent and moral in their stance here, because the fact that they've singled out XXXTentacion and R. Kelly is a little ridiculous. Like, not only in the context of this, but also in the context of, like, there are other contemporaries of theirs who also have allegations against them who aren't being discussed in these discussions, or don't seem to have been sort of treated in the same way that they have. With whatever decisions Spotify makes going forward, affecting the bottom line or not, it needs to be across the board. It needs to be consistent. You either need to be treating every artist by these standards, or you just need to change the standards. And again, I'm not making a moral argument here. I'm making well, you wrote the policy. It's up to you to hold it up, or else it's just going to be chaos. Nobody's going to know what you really want. Nobody's really going to know what the heck to expect going forward, because you're just kind of selectively deciding, well, this is in, this is out, this is in, this is out. Even the decision that they made policy-wise to remove R. Kelly and XXXTentacion's music from these playlists doesn't quite make sense, because it's a weird extension of their hate speech, hateful content policy, which doesn't even fully apply. You really could have, I guess, written a new part of the policy, or really kind of sat down and waited and thought this out before you executed this, without somebody who is being directly affected by this decision kind of undercutting your decision here by pointing out a major flaw in your decision making here. So I think Spotify, its heart was a little in the right place in trying to take kind of a measured decision here, in that, well, we'll allow it on the platform, but we're not going to promote it. We're not going to, swear by it. We're not going to take a bullet for it. We're not going to align our brand with it. Sensible decision. I don't think in the abstract, that is a bad decision for a business like Spotify to make. But as X's team points out here, if that's going to be your decision, then you have to apply it across the board. You have to apply it across the board. And as far as R. Kelly's camp responding to this, which I think is not the more the more tasteful of the responses, R. Kelly's people essentially said in response to this, Spotify has the right to promote whatever music it chooses, and in this case, its actions are without merit, R. Kelly's management team said. It is acting based on false and unproven allegations. It is bowing to social media fads and picking sides in a fame-seeking dispute over matters that have nothing to do with serving customers. Now, to sort of say that interest in issues like sexual assault and sexual abuse is just merely a fad, maybe history might play that one out. I really don't know at this point. I hope that's not the case. I hope people continue to care whether or not people are sexually abused or assaulted or, murdered and whatever other horrible thing that, an artist could do to another person. I hope people's concern for those issues stay high. I feel like it's even worse for R. Kelly's camp to sort of just be like, oh, well, none of this stuff even really matters, and this is all just a fad that anybody's concerned with this sort of stuff anyway. So let's just totally write it off. Now, I mean, in the case of R. Kelly, I feel like there are still a lot of questions that come up in terms of like the allegations about him being sort of a pattern of behavior. Again, at the end of the day, like, I'm not the judge, I'm not the jury, I'm not the one sort of convicting him or whatever. But I do think music fans are within their right to be concerned about the things that they read about R. Kelly, and to kind of write that off entirely as just like totally a fad. Like, people shouldn't be concerned or worried about these things just seems kind of like tasteless and just like a little callous. Hopefully people kind of prove themselves to be a little bit more sensitive on these issues and focused on them going forward. But to assert that all of this is just a fad and it's just going to go away and it's just kind of, poo-poo whatever, is a little cold and is a little unnecessary, I think. But so there you go. I mean, those are essentially kind of my thoughts on this thing in total. I think Spotify roughly made an okay decision, but if they're going to continue with this decision and carry it out, they need to do it all the way. They need to go the full Monty, and they need to be consistent with it. Or they just need to decide that, well, listen, we're a company, and it's not our job to make moral decisions. It's our job to make money. It's our job to hire employees. It's our job to provide music. It's not our job to decide morally what is right and what is wrong, and which artists are good and which artists are bad, and which artists are behaving well and which artists are not behaving well, and whatever, because that's essentially the decision that they're making here. Because it has very little to do with the content of the actual music and more to do with, well, we've decided that we don't like this person's actions, so we're going to basically affect how we promote that person or how that person's music lives on our platform. Again, their decision. But it's not something you can just be selective about, because you're a huge, major company. You're under a microscope. You're under a magnifying glass. And people are going to analyze every decision that you're doing and question you on it if you're not being consistent, or if they can easily poke holes in the narrative, which XXXTentacion's camp clearly has. Is what they brought up here grounds for Spotify going back on their decision? I actually think it's more grounds for Spotify following through on the statement they've made here. If they really mean it, and maybe they might not, because when it comes to the money they're making, and I guarantee that the discussion is happening is, okay, well, if we're going to be consistent, we might have to remove these artists from playlists. If we do, what's that going to mean for the money? What's that going to mean for the bottom line? If the bottom line gets affected and we lose X amount of dollars, I guarantee that discussion is either happening or thought of, in some way, shape, or form. And if that's the discussion that you're happening, is it really a moral decision at this point? Is it really a moral decision, or is it more about the money? All right, I'm going to leave it at that. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up, or the link to subscribe to the channel. Love you, love you, love you. Anthony Fantano, forever.